Hello.
Hello. Welcome
What's
to
up?
Braces.
Welcome to what?
Life with Braces.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything you want to get out of your system now? Because Brandy is in the room. The waiting room.
Oh, no, I don't think so. We talked with her already. I don't know. It's cold in here, and my camera quality is today.
Hello, Brandy.
How are y'all?
How are you?
Doing well.
Doing well. I don't want to make any assumptions, but it looks like you're in the car.
I am. My internet at home isn't great,
No,
so
that's fine.
I always have to travel. So the boys are actually, I'm at the soccer field, so they're playing around while I meet.
Life of a multitasker, huh?
Yes.
What time's soccer over?
Oh, no, they're just playing on their own. There is no soccer
Okay.
this week because of spring break.
So depending on how long I talk, they could be out there for hours.
Yes, which I've brought them up here 3 times this week, and they've normally spent about an hour and a half each time. So
Real quick, how do you say your last name? Is it Combs?
Coombs,
Coombs. Okay. And what school are you at?
Wake Forest Charter
Wake
Academy.
Forest. When I was growing up, I had a list of schools I wanted to play college basketball at. Wake Forest was one of them. So was Duke, though. I apparently have something
Yeah.
for the South.
It's awesome down here.
It's good. It's funny. My mom and dad are from Michigan, and they're on spring break right now because my mom's a teacher, and they were, I can't remember, Bass Pro Shop or Cabela, somewhere. I don't know. And somebody was asking where they're from, obviously, because they didn't have the lovely southern drawl, and they said Michigan. And apparently the guy working there was like, "Welcome to the South. This is America for Americans." Because we're still pretty restricted up here.
Yeah.
So they obviously love that.
That's awesome.
This is a very broad question. I know we did our pre-interview, but I have. Haley, you okay? Or are you just wiping your screen off?
My screen is so blurry. Does it look blurry to you?
No.
Oh, well, then it's just the lighting, I guess. I don't know.
So
Continue.
we're talking about teaching in a practical life setting. I'm just trying to figure out what we call this thing once we set it up.
Like life connections or real life connections
Using the
or real world
classroom to
connections.
connect with, using the classroom as an opportunity. I'll figure something out. Using the classroom as an opportunity to connect with real life or something like that. The intro is going to take like 9 tries, so don't worry too much about that. So is there any points you want to hit on, anywhere you want to make sure we go on this, or just kind of let it go where it goes?
I say just let it go where it goes.
Okay.
Because I can't. Yeah.
And what grade do you teach?
7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th grade. I'm just going to say middle school teacher.
Yeah.
Well, on the
I think a good chunk of
2 or 3.
Yeah.
A good chunk what?
I was going to say, I think a good chunk of the NHA schools do have 7th and 8th grade sciences together, and 6th grade is science and studies. So.
Before I asked you how you say your last name, I was secretly hoping you were related to Luke Combs.
No. He's only 1 O.
Okay. I'm a big fan of him.
Boys
Eric Church is my guy for a long time, but Luke Combs is coming pretty hard.
Yeah.
Saw him
We
in
enjoy
concert.
You saw him in concert?
Yeah. Luke Combs? Yeah.
Love him.
Awesome.
Yes. It was a really good concert, if you were wondering things.
Just trying to figure out how I'm going to set this up. I will figure it out. All right, I will get the mic turned on, and then we'll get rolling. So you should hear an audibly noticeable difference. I don't know if either one of those words are real. Audibly might I don't know.
Yeah.
But I should very quickly sound like a DJ on the radio.
Okay. Da-da-da. How old are your kids?
10, 13, and 16.
That's a fun age to just let them run around in the park.
Yep.
All
They're
right.
pretty self-sufficient most of the time.
So it says the speaker is now, or the microphone is now my microphone. Was there a difference in the past minute or so where I sound maybe like a drive time DJ?
I could tell a little bit.
Haley, you've been on these a lot. Does it sound like it should?
Can you go back? Do it again.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So I have turned the mic off, and I will now.
Turn the mic on.
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're good to go.
All right.
Oh my gosh, you're our 12th one. How do I normally set this up? Is it welcome? Is it on
Hey
today?
there.
It's not hi there.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all. I don't know if my sharp Michigan accent can pull off y'all. Hey, y'all. We had a ton of family in Pennsylvania growing up, and they obviously have an accent too. And that was always the joke. My dad one time said, "Scott, go get the pop out of the car." So for years, "Scott, go get the pop out of the car." We're not from Massachusetts. It's not that aggressive.
Yeah, I can't do those accents. I'll just stick with the Southern one.
I'd love Southern accents. I've decided I'm going to force my children, which is always a good way to start a sentence, my future children someday that I don't have, to either have a British accent or a Southern accent. I love that.
Okay. I know how you normally start these. I just started one of the Spotify episodes.
Okay. What's it?
On today's
welcome.
episode of.
No, I think that's the intro I record after the fact. I think it's Welcome to Teachers Lounge. Today we're talking with. That sounds right. All right. We are good.
Okay, bye. Best
Bye.
of luck. Gonna turn my video off.
Welcome to the Teachers Lounge. Today we're talking with Brandy Coombs, 7th and 8th grade teacher at, all right, there's attempt 1. You think we would, have this locked down as you're our 13th episode or whatever, but
Yeah.
not. Welcome to the Teachers Lounge. Today we're talking with Brandy Coombs.
Yes.
I tried writing it out how it sounds, and now I can't read my writing. And I got Luke Combs stuck in my head. And I keep telling myself it's not Luke. Welcome to the Teachers Lounge. Today we're talking with Brandy Coombs, 7th and 8th grade science teacher at Wake Forest Charter Academy. And we're talking about how you can use the curriculum in your classroom, how you teach to kind of connect your students with real life experiences. This is a topic I've wanted to do for a while. I think it's a pretty cool concept. I've always been a big fan of, when you're sitting in a math class and you think, I'll never use this someday. And all of a sudden your math teacher is able to tie it into some sort of real life experience. I've always really appreciated that. So thank you, Brandy, for being on. Maybe the best place to start, this might be kind of a broad question, but to you, a middle school science teacher, when you talk about, using your classroom and curriculum as an opportunity to teach life experiences, what does that mean?
Kind of how you had mentioned when you were a kid, having those teachers that are able to make that connection. I felt the same way. And so when I'm teaching, I'm always I feel like I learn best when I'm able to make that connection. So I'm always trying to do that in the classroom as well with my students, even if it's while we're out at recess. Right now we're learning about physics. So while they're playing different sports, I'll bring in a lot of the terms that we've been learning about, force of motion, and sometimes I get an eye roll, but then they'll come back and go, oh, well, this is what an unbalanced force is. And they'll start to bring that in, making the connections. So when we're talking about in class, they have that to be able to feed back from.
So before we get too deep into, how do you kind of identify where these opportunities are and how you do this, how important is it having a quality relationships with your students before you try doing this, right? Because I just think of, you know, I had a middle school math teacher that I was not, you know, I didn't have a good relationship with all, wasn't super connected to her. And I wonder if she would have tried to tell me about, you know, math concepts at recess if I would have listened. So how important is having relationships with your students before you go down this path of, you know, incorporating some of your lessons during recess, kickball, dodgeball, basketball?
I think it definitely helps a lot if you already have that relationship with them, because then they're wanting to hear from you and you're able to have that two-way communication with them. But it's also a great way to make those connections, because when I'm able to reach out to the students just to bring in that terminology or those concepts in what they're doing, you're starting to build some of that relationship as well. So those students there are normally a few in a group that you have a stronger connection with, that they are a group of friends. You may not have that same connection with everyone in that same group. So when I'm talking to the one that I have a better connection with, I'm able to then, the other ones are starting to pop in and we're able to make more connections that way as well.
So, and this might be a silly question. I'm not a teacher. So it would probably take me, you know, a real concerted effort to find these opportunities. But how are you discovering the opportunities to reinforce these lessons to real life circumstances? It just kind of happen? Do you know, kind of build in happy coincidences throughout the day? Like, oh, it's a nice day outside. I know they're probably going to be playing kickball. Now we can talk about Newton's first law of motion or whatever physics you guys are talking about.
Most of the time they're not pre-planned. It's just kind of as it comes about, based on what they're doing. I know specifically a few weeks ago they were playing football, and based on how one of them was throwing it, they were able to get it to go further than the others. And so someone had asked a question about the other player, and I was able to bring in what we were learning to that. And I can't exactly pre-plan that. That's just kind of what come about. And being able to bring in some of the terminology based on the amount of force, what was the mass of the ball. And then there was someone in another group that was playing with a small kickball, and like, well, what if we compared those? And then we talked about air resistance. So a lot of it is not pre-planned. It's just based on what happens to come about. We can have some days where we don't bring it in at all, and other days I can actually bring it in multiple times. Even just sitting in the classroom, I'll try to bring in a little bit here or there. It just, I guess, depends on what the topics are. I try to normally keep it to where it's more relevant to what we're actually learning right then, but I will still bring up stuff from prior units or things that I know that they're going to be learning next year or the year they had already learned the year before. And we're able to kind of make those connections, just how we can see science in everyday life. And that's why it's so important that we are learning the curriculum to be able to make those connections.
One of the things that I think is really cool about this is I think you have to provide an environment, or like we said, have a relationships with your students before you can, right? I just don't think you can just shout this at kids on the playground and have them be responsive to it. Is this something that, because obviously at the beginning of school year, you have new kids and you have to kind of rebuild these new relationships. Is this something you start in the classroom at the beginning of the year, and kind of how you teach your curriculum, how you teach your lessons, where you're including, some of these examples of, some of the topics you're covering, to kind of build that baseline to have some of these other impromptu, I don't want to call them lessons, but impromptu, curriculum reinforcers?
I want to make sure I understand kind of the question.
What a great question, Scott. So I think basically what I'm trying to ask is, I think it's really cool that you have kind of these impromptu sessions on the playground, but is this something that you have to start in the classroom with your curriculum and kind of, 1 + 1 is 2, here's how we see 2 before you're on the playground?
Yeah, I definitely think it's something that we kind of start in the classroom, but I really think I start this from like day one. One of the first things I do because of I love science just because of I feel like I'm always learning. I love to learn. So there's a lot of things in my life that are related to science. So I always share with them, for example, the farm animals I have or the garden I have, things that have to do with science that are in my life that I'll share with them. And that kind of lets them see some of that connections that I like to learn. And then I'll give them an assignment of get to know you. And it's normally science related. Like, what is your favorite way to burn energy? Or what did you do over the summer to burn energy? So just making those connections where it's something that it's fun, but understanding there is that connection to science as well.
That's an interesting concept of, because we've done a number of podcasts, and it's interesting to me how every teacher we talk to, it always comes back to the relationships with students, how to keep them engaged. All of these things always come back to the relationships with students. We've had a number of teachers tell us different ways that they connect with students. But this is an interesting kind of unique way of you're using the get to know you phase as an opportunity to teach real life lessons. That's pretty cool. And, I think I remember as being a 7th grade, 8th grade student myself, I can't remember how many times I told myself, my parents, my teacher, I'm never going to use this in real life. So starting that school year off on the right foot of asking you a question that seems relatively, it's the prototypical, do you have any pets, something like that, but asking them something that kind of sets up that curriculum and then using that as an opportunity to teach these real life experiences. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't try to restrain it just to what my curriculum is. I wish we had all the time in the world to teach everything that there is with science each year. But at least with those get to know you things, and that's why I said sometimes even when we're having just general discussions during transition and things like that, I'll bring in stuff even if it's not linked to what our particular curriculum is. And I do think it helps to build their relationships. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not the only thing I talk to my kids about is just science stuff, but it definitely helps by us having that two-way communication. It helps build relationships, and it also helps to strengthen the relationships that we've already built and allows them to open up and ask questions and ask wonderings that they have that sometimes may seem a little bit off topic in class when we're having a discussion, but sometimes there is a link and it brings in that real world, something that they really wanted to know about. And they feel more comfortable asking me those questions once they know that I don't mind answering and I want to make those connections and I want them to like learning.
I think that's an important qualifier that you are allowing them to prompt some of these, quote, life lessons, right? Like I remember sitting in math class and you're talking about, percentages and all this stuff, and 7th grade Scott didn't care, but he had, a Michael Jordan basketball card that he was looking up and researching and saying, 10% increase in price. What does that mean? So I was more interested in learning. And I remember asking my teacher, what does this mean? Instead of looking at a worksheet of just saying, calculate 10%. So I think that's pretty cool that you use these opportunities to kind of, stimulate the brain of your students. And, like you said, how do you burn energy? Get them thinking. I honestly, I didn't pay attention much in middle school science. What are some of the answers you get on burning energy?
Normally it's their fun hobbies. It was going swimming or playing sports, taking a hike, just different things that they like to do where they were up and moving, not just laying around watching TV, just things that they were interested in. A lot of times it does have to do with sports because they obviously are going to burn a lot of energy with that. And so that would be typical answers I would get for that question.
What, when where am I going with this one? What made you have this as a priority in the classroom? What shifted the focus from, I don't like that. How long have you been a teacher?
17 years.
Wow. Not all at Wake Forest.
No. I've been there the last 2 years.
I'm trying to think, when did Wake Forest open?
7 years ago.
Okay. There you go.
My boys started the first year and I came the second year.
Okay. Oh, that's fun. Did you ever have your boys as students?
Oh, yes. my oldest I had for 3 years. My middle one I have currently now, and this is my second year with him.
Huh.
So
I love my mom. She's the greatest person on this planet. I didn't want to have her as a math teacher, though. There's something to be said about not paying attention. And when it's your mom, you have to pay attention.
yeah, my oldest he would still goof off and be his normal self. Whereas, like, I know there was one year I was the first one to give him a disciplinary warning out of all the teachers. Whereas my middle one, he's very quiet, doesn't want to talk at all in my class.
Yeah. So, what made you originally want to go down this path of encouraging your students to think in life lessons when it comes to some of the stuff you guys are talking about in the classroom?
I think some of it did come just naturally because I wanted them to find something that they could just learn, even if it's not necessarily on a test. But I think also after several years of teaching, noticing a lot of the kids kind of the same idea that you and I probably had in school. Well, what's the point? I'm never going to use this in life. And so trying to make as many of those connections as possible to make them at least a little bit more interested and more focused on maybe I do need to know this. Not every concept and topic is easy to do that with. So those that are a lot easier, I really try to really focus on just to kind of get that connection started, and then we can dive in deeper into the other concepts that are more difficult to find those connections.
You must absolutely, and we'll cut this piece, I'm just kind of curious, but you must absolutely love, not COVID in general, but the refocus around science. Like if I have to see Trust Science one more time, I'm like, okay, well, not all of us paid attention in science. Like, sorry guys, I trust what I can't remember.
Well, and it was actually, although I don't like COVID, but when we first started, my unit I was going into was about microbes and pandemics and epidemics anyways.
Wow.
So I was like, you know what? I've never had kids being interested in this unit at all. It's always been one of the hardest ones to teach because they've never been around during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I was really able to get so many connections, and I had so many more questions during that unit. And I think that was probably one of the best units I had all year last year, which was really sad, but it made that connection.
Again, not cool that we went through a pandemic and, COVID, nobody likes that piece, but that's cool that you're able to shift a lesson that's not, normally super engaging to something that, they can kind of relate to. We did a podcast a couple months ago on student engagement, and I have to assume you tying in these, quote, life lessons into the curriculum, that's got to add just a whole nother layer to student engagement.
Yeah.
Do you find that, and there's probably no way to actually gauge this, but is there a way to, noticeably notice the students are more engaged during this type of stuff?
I think there is. I don't know if I can necessarily track it per se with using data. But just with the eye contact and the number of students that are raising their hands and wanting to ask questions and wanting to participate, depending on what the topic is, they're able to. Or if I ask them a question of, when would you have used this in the last 24 hours or something like that, I can get a lot more responses once we've had those discussions. It also gives them more confidence. If we're able to have those outside of the classroom conversations, they kind of already know they're on the right track, and so they don't mind sharing it with the rest of the class. And so they feel a lot more confident about what they know, and that gives them kind of that extra self-esteem boost that, hey, I actually know this, and Ms. Coombs is proud of me for sharing this.
That's pretty cool. Confidence is not something I thought we were going to hit on when we started, talking about this as an episode. And, I think there's some truth to that, because math, it's, a right or wrong answer, but science, there's an opportunity for 7th grade Scott to get lost and not be able to check his work. So that's a cool piece to kind of tie into this piece of student confidence.
Yeah. And I think,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with a lot of my students, not all of them, not every student's going to be successful at a test or some type of an assessment. And so I want them to still love learning, and I want them to feel successful. And I always preach to them, even if they got 55 on the test, it's like, you know what? You've really grown, because before you got a 45 and now you have a 55. And so while they may not always be successful in some areas, I always try to encourage them to understand how they're growing. And so if I can get them to be more successful in another area, even if it's just in a discussion, they have that confidence to keep trying and want to work harder to make those baby steps in the areas they're not as good in.
That's really cool. You know, I've always heard people say, you know, a topic well when you can teach it or when you can talk about it. That's probably exactly what you're experiencing with your students. They might not be able to test on it well, but can you talk about it? Can we put this in real life practical situations, and can you carry on a conversation with it?
And what kind of goes along with that is that whole idea is you learn it better when you teach it. And so by them sharing, and then I'll question them, it's like, well, how exactly is this connected? And I'll ask them questions to kind of help them dive in deeper where they may not have thought about it before. But that way, then they're teaching their classmates kind of their understanding, and we're able to work through it. And it's an area that they're more comfortable in discussing because it's connected with them directly.
Wake Forest, I have no idea what kind of area that is. I know they're the Demon Deacons, but is that a pretty agriculturally rich area? Like, are there a lot of farm kids? I guess that's what I'm asking.
They're not there. And actually, Wake Forest University used to be in Wake Forest. It's no longer. It's now in Winston-Salem.
Oh, that's right. It's the Tobacco Road, right?
No, that's
Duke in North Carolina.
Yeah. So the Wake Forest University is a little bit further west, but Wake Forest is where Wake Forest University originally was. It is now a seminary. But Wake Forest, so I grew up, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sorry. I had to go to North Carolina with one of my directors a couple of years ago, and we went to Wake Forest. It's a brand new campus, right? Like, it's all, at least the medical side we were on, it was beautiful. And there was like a little town built up because of that. We're in Winston-Salem.
I'm not in Winston-Salem, no.
Is Wake Forest?
But Wake Forest University is in Winston-Salem. No, that's about
where we were.
2 hours away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know where I was originally going or what I originally asked. 32,
No,
I still think I'm going to play college basketball.
Yeah. So growing up, I grew up in Wake County, which Wake Forest is in Wake County. I was in the eastern side of Wake County where it is more agricultural, definitely lots of farmland. When I grew up and went through high school, Wake Forest itself was kind of like out in the middle of nowhere because there was the farming and all that stuff. Now it's a lot more built up. You don't have hardly any farmland in Wake Forest. You have to go kind of out of the county to get to most of that. But most of our area and our students, how do I describe them? They're similar to what you would have like I don't know if you've been to like Apex charter.
Yep.
It's similar. It's kind of in between Apex and Roseville. Roseville is pretty similar to Wake Forest as well. So you don't have as many of the lower income. We do have some. I mean, I drive from out of the county where I'm more rural and drive in. And we do have some of those that are from those areas that live near the farmland. But not a whole lot of them. Now, where I've taught previously, that's all I've ever taught was a lot of migrant workers and stuff.
One of the reasons I asked that is my sister is also a teacher, a high school teacher. I forget exactly what her title is that she teaches, but it is a very farm town hick school. It's not far from where we grew up. We grew up in a farm town, but she just got a new budget for like classroom chickens. They've got, a class, a lot of her kids are in 4-H and, they're raising eggs. She wanted to get a snake for the classroom. I thought, are you kidding me? Not. over my dead body, you're getting a snake. But that's part of the reason I was curious, because a lot of her students, like I said, they hunt every fall. They're in 4-H. So a lot of the stuff, they're working on soil last month. So they went to a local farm and we're talking to the farmer about his soil and stuff. So that's why I was just kind of curious.
Now that's the high school I went to was very much like that.
Yeah.
Wake Forest isn't as much like that, but I try to bring in a lot of those concepts because many kids, for example, don't realize where their food comes from. And so that's one of the reasons why I started the garden there at Wake Forest. And like the first year when we were actually able to grow and we ate the lettuce and they had their own homegrown salad and they thought it was the best thing ever. And so they didn't realize how much went into the food that they were able to grow. Because some of them were like, well, can we grow oranges? And I'm like, that's a lot more complicated. And so trying to teach them about
chicken
exactly
nuggets.
Yep.
So, you've been teaching for 17 years. I think it's, safe to say you're kind of in a nice rhythm when it comes to looking for spots to place these real life, opportunities to teach the curriculum. But if I'm a newer teacher, or if I'm pretty new in my teaching journey, and whether I teach science or math or social studies, how do I start looking for these opportunities to connect the curriculum with some of the things students might be experiencing, whether that's on the playground or in their real life or around them? How do I look for these opportunities if this is something I want to incorporate into my classroom?
One thing I would definitely suggest is don't try to make those connections with every single lesson, because that will become extremely overwhelming. And even as a veteran teacher, I can't necessarily make those connections with every single lesson. But maybe try to find one connection you can make for each unit. And once you can start to make some of those connections, it'll sometimes almost like domino effect it or snowball to where you're able to make more connections. But probably try to pre-plan one connection each unit to be able to have those discussions that are more real life connections to them. And then as you more years of experience, you can add in more connections and it'll become more natural to you.
When you say don't do it for every unit or every lesson, is that just because it loses some of its, I don't want to call it thrill, but it loses some of its steam?
Well, it's kind of a twofold. One is I don't want you to feel overwhelmed trying to make that connection with every single one, because then you lose kind of your focus on making sure that they understand the information instead of, you don't want to always just focus on the real life. But you also want it to be more of a natural discussion and flow to where it doesn't always feel as pre-planned. And so if you're looking for every single unit, hey, or every single lesson, this is how it's connected and how you use it again, they're just going to expect that. And so it's going to lose kind of that impact that it has when it's more spontaneous or just every once in a while. This
might be a really silly question, but can you overplan these? Like, is there some value to having this organically and just kind of having it come up?
Yeah, I think you can overplan, because if you do start to really plan and focus, you're expecting one answer from a student or a specific answer. And instead you want them to figure things out and be able to come up with those answers. And it may not be the exact wording you were looking for, because then you may steer them in a direction to where it's more forced and like a lesson instead of what they actually know and what they can actually connect.
That's, I think, an important point about this, that, teachers in general, you plan out your seating chart, your curriculum, your lesson plans, most teachers will tell you the majority of their day is planned. But giving up some of this planning and control to your students to encourage some of this dialogue. Is that something that's difficult to kind of wrap your head around the first couple times you do this?
I think it can be, because you also have to be cautious about where the students are going to go. And for example, I know my oldest student was always really big about trying to get me off topic because he knew that I would go on a tangent and something I was passionate about, just to be able to waste time in class. And so you definitely don't want it to be where I just lost 30 minutes of my teaching time talking about this because they wanted to go off on a tangent. And so there are times that you have to kind of bring it back in and kind of refocus back on what you're actually covering. But there are times where we've had those 30-minute discussions and we actually ended up hitting on like 5 different concepts that we were in the process of learning. So that was very meaningful. So you're having to judge and have some flexibility of, is this going to be beneficial to them or is this not? Now, if we're out on the playground and they're asking me these type of questions and they're going off on a tangent, that's fine. That's their time and we can make more of those connections. And I have said, how about we talk about this one after class or during lunch, and to where we can still, I don't want to discourage them to have those conversations, but I also want to make sure during my class time that it's going to be more helpful and not hurtful.
It's funny you say that. We had our middle school or high school civics teacher, Mr. Morehouse. My man, Mr. Morehouse, probably is no longer with us. He was like 80 when I was there. And that was the running joke. That was like what you pass down to the grades below you, that, here are kind of the 5 topics you have. One time, and the Civil War was one of them, that if you got them going on the Civil War, we were supposed to have like a pretty big test, and we got them going on the Civil War and actually ran out the class without ever taking the test, just because. Okay, well, what about the South? Were they really the bad? Well, let me tell you, it's just like, but to your point, like just letting them get rolling, it's like there's still middle school and high school boys in that classroom that are looking, I didn't study. Oh, tell me more about Gatlinburg. Is there anything else you want to hit on?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, I can definitely think of examples of where I've made more of those connections. But I think we've also kind of covered quite a few.
Are there certain areas of your curriculum that it's hard to make these connections?
Yes. I guess depending on which grade I'm talking about, but with 7th grade, like when we talk about the human body, while you can make connections to like what's going on in the body, it's really hard to have too much because there's only so much you can see. And that, I don't know, that one is where it can really get on a tangent and off places, because I'm like, oh, but I have this disorder. Oh, my mom has this, or my uncle, or I knew someone that knew someone that. So those are a lot harder to really focus in on what we're actually learning about, instead of just being more broad. But like when I love doing the weather unit, because we're always, every time there's a big storm coming up, even I do the weather at the beginning of the year, even to like now, I will still bring up whenever we're getting a big system coming in, I'll go, hey, let's take 5 minutes and look at the weather forecast and break down what we've talked about before. Why is this happening? And I'll ask them the question, what type of front's coming through? What can be causing it? Why is this type of precipitation happening? I'm also trying to think. I think also some topics that they don't know as much about, like when I teach about biotechnology, that one's harder for them to make more of those connections because they just don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
As I start to introduce them to it, I'm telling them connections that they have. They just can't do that on their own.
So, you mentioned earlier that, it's important to not look for these connections in every unit. Sometimes would that be a good example of it? With the human body, there's a lot of, we'll call it margins for error, where each kid wants to talk about the disease their grandma has or uncle, that it can just get away, and all of a sudden these connections are just wasting time and you're not talking about the curriculum.
Yeah. And I still will try to make those connections. It's like I normally try to do it kind of at the end of a lesson, because I know it can kind of go everywhere. And I will also, because I know that's one that they always have a lot of questions with, I'll have like the parking lot where they can put down questions or set, like write it down and we'll get to them at the end of class. Because I still want to be able to answer those questions, but I also don't want them to get distracted by those questions and miss out what we were actually trying to learn.
And that's got to be something that, for a newer teacher, college won't teach you, student teaching won't teach you. That's just, I assume, trial by fire. Yeah.
Yes. Even like you can have new topics that come up and you're like, I never even thought about that connection. And this is what I could have done differently, because I'm always reflecting on those conversations we're having. So that is something that just because you're a new teacher doesn't mean you're the only one that would struggle with it. Even veteran teachers will have issues with certain topics, or just a certain group of kids that you're not expecting the responses they give.
Biotechnology is fascinating and freaks me out at the same time. Like, I'm a big Joe Rogan fan. He had Elon. Let me rephrase that. I really like Joe Rogan, but I love Elon Musk. I think he's an alien, and I'm just glad he's on our side. But some of the stuff he's doing, like, forget Tesla, forget the rocket ships. Have you ever looked into Neuralink?
My husband's a huge fan of his as well, so I know he's mentioned that before. I haven't looked into it much. It
freaks me out. But basically, Haley, I'm not sure if you know it over well, but basically what they want to do is, like, one of my best friends broke his neck in college. So he walks with a cane now. He's in a wheelchair for a long time. But Elon Musk is basically making the case that a lot of the medical issues you have, it is due to neurons misfiring, and he relates your brain to a computer, and it's this is the motherboard, and you just have bad circuits. So Neuralink, they would drill a hole in your head and basically put a chip in to where when certain things are misfiring, this algorithm fixes the misfiring. And he's of the belief he can fix anything from paralysis to Alzheimer's to heart attacks and loss of limbs, stroke victims. And they tested it out on pigs, and it is freaky. Wow. And like there were some pigs that were paralyzed, and they put Neuralink in without telling it to fix this specific thing. The AI kind of gets rolling, and it picks up what should be happening, and this pig came out walking. It's like, this is weird.
Wow. That would be
I don't know if
amazing.
Like, I'm excited for like my buddy for something like that, but it's like, okay, that's where we draw the line. No more. Like, what do we do if Elon gets kidnapped and somebody just shuts it all off or programs us to? Neuralink is fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Well, it'd be nice if you could kind of fix it, but then didn't necessarily have the connection, like where it couldn't be hijacked outside.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about, is there a database? Where does this go? I have no idea. Kind of the back end of it. But if your husband likes Joe Rogan or Elon Musk, they talked about it for like 20 minutes. You could probably just YouTube Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Neuralink, and it freaks me out.
Well, I know right now, because like I said, the reason why I'm in the car doing this is our internet's so bad because we live out in the country. Yeah. So we've already kind of signed up for Elon Musk, the internet satellite.
Oh, Skylink? That he's doing. Yeah.
Yes. So we're like already on like the top of the list for once they get to our area, like, let us get something that works.
I love him.
But much. Yeah, it's amazing that he's able to do so much, and it's all science related.
Yeah, and he's doing, I mean, if you were to say, all right, Scott, you're going to develop a ship that goes in the sky, that would take all my time. But you're also going to run an electric car company, the boring company that no one ever talks about, Neuralink. Like, it's like, dude, you've got 2 kids too. Like, how are you doing this?
Yeah. Wow.
And the fact that he put a Tesla Roadster in space, that is, I think, like the ultimate power move. Like, look at me.
I can do what I want to do.
Exactly. I own all of these companies. Who cares?
But I think he's also a great role model to the kids in that you can do, but you have to put forth the work, because it's not like it was an easy thing for him. He really had to work hard.
I don't want this to seem like I've got a crush on Elon. Maybe I do, but he's a good lesson for a lot of things. He went bankrupt 4 times. Like, he made billions off PayPal and then lost it all on SpaceX, and then made like billions more and then lost it and made billions. Like, this concept that you fail once you're done is like, dang. You know, maybe you should have Elon come to your class and talk about it. That might be
Amazing.
He's actually, we're talking to him next week. I don't know if I told you that or not. No.
No,
No,
that
there's
would be
not a
so
chance
cool.
I could get him.
Yeah.
Our budget for this, A, is 0. B, I don't have the same name recognition outside of my mom that Joe Rogan does.
But he really should do it because it's free advertisement to all these kids that he's going to eventually have
Yeah.
working for his companies.
Yeah, I don't know. He's fascinating. When he goes on Joe Rogan for like 4 hours, somehow 4 hours is not enough time for those two. Because
Yeah.
Joe Rogan is an idiot. I identify with Joe Rogan so much because he has no idea what he's talking about. But he sits there and you can tell his mind's getting blown, but he's asking probably the smartest person on the planet the dumbest questions in the world. But it's the same questions I want answered because I have no idea what Neuralink is. Like Elon will go to this 10-minute, thesis about Neuralink, and Rogan's like, so it can make you walk again? It's like, were you not listening? I love those two. My goal is to one day have this be at that level and then sell out. So if you could go back to yourself, the first, standing in front of a class for the first time by yourself, this is your first year teaching, first day, what would you tell yourself about creating these touch points with real life in the curriculum?
Probably to start doing it sooner than what I did, because it really does help to booster a lot more of those relationships than what we had. It also really helps them learn more and understand that they can still achieve, because I don't want them to get stuck on, oh, I'm not good at this. I know math is one of the biggest things the kids are always like, I am no good at math. I can't do math. And they love it when I have math in science class because they're like, wait a minute, Miss Coombs, we just did math class. Why are we doing it again? It's like, well, science has a lot of math. And I'm like, but this is going to be simple stuff you can do. And I'll show them that they can still accomplish it. And even with fractions, when we do genetics and the Punnett square, there's fractions all in it, and they're good at it. And I'm like, see, you can do math. You can be successful. So just getting them understanding the real use for these and that they can be successful in something, even if it may not be at the exact time that you're testing them on it or at the exact subject, but that you can be successful and you are good at stuff. You just have to figure out how to make it work for you. So I wish I had kind of come across that a little bit earlier and been able to do it better at the beginning. But I think I started to notice I needed to do that. And when I did it a few times, I noticed a huge improvement in that connection with the kids and what they were able to do.
And I think that's an important point that you just hit on, that, this might not exactly be reflected in test scores. This is, maybe something you don't see results of until further down the road, but these touch points are important. It's really identifying, the area that your students live in, whether that's urban, suburban, balanced. There's, touch points that you can make for any student that you have, regardless of the curriculum, if you're just, kind of willing to put this to curriculum in action. So thank you, Brandy. This was, interesting. And I appreciate you taking me into your classroom and kind of walking us through, some of the touch points that you use and, how you can look for some of these opportunities. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you for having me. I definitely enjoyed it.
Boom. Haley, any last thoughts you want added in? Thoughts, concerns, questions about Neuralink?
Freaks me out.
Yep. Did you look it up, or was that just our
No.
kind of talking about it that you heard about it?
Oh my gosh, no, I didn't know anything about it until you mentioned it. That's
Terrifying. Listen to him
Like
talk
that.
about Rogan. Listen to him on Rogan, though, because it does kind of put your mind at ease at some of the good that could come of this,
Okay.
No, I could
if it
definitely
doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
Yeah.
So your boys still running
No, I'm
around out there, or are they passed out from exhaustion yet?
Yeah, they're still going. Yeah. They have my youngest in goal trying to be goalie.
I never enjoyed soccer, but goalie is one thing I particularly hated. It's like, yeah, everybody line up and kick balls at my face. That sounds fun.
Yeah. That's what
It's like
they're
dodgeball, but you're the only one playing.
Exactly. Well, also, last thing before I kind of close out here and let this thing export. You guys are doing physics in 7th and 8th grade.
Mhm.
I never had
Even-
physics in my entire college and high school career.
It's very simplistic. I mean, we do like Newton's laws. We do just what
Okay.
makes things move. How do we describe it as moving? My son in high school in 10th grade is doing an actual physics class where he's doing more of it. So it's more of just the simple basics. Because even 8th grade, I do chemistry, but it's not like high school chemistry. It's what are atoms, what are elements, how to read the periodic table, understanding the equations have to be balanced, but not necessarily having to go through and balance them to the extent you would have to in high school.
I actually, when I was in high school, if I took AP, some science class, I can't remember, but it got me out of chemistry. And I was like, yep, sign me up. I don't want to do chemistry, and I never took chemistry either. But yeah.
Yeah. Now, I didn't like chemistry in high school, but I love teaching it now.
Yeah.
Just because, of course, right now the kids are like, "Oh, do we get to blow stuff up?" And I'm like, "No."
That's second semester.
Like, no, we are not blowing stuff up. But I explain how things can maybe get blown up and that it's a chemical reaction. But you're going
This is
to
what
end
was-
up with the same number of atoms before and after.
This is the science behind the hydrogen bomb. This is why it was such a big deal. All just a little
Yeah.
chemistry. This is why Breaking Bad is possible, guys. This is how meth
Yes.
is made. I remember trying to like
That's
pitch
why I'm a
that.
chemistry teacher.
I started watching that like before it got big, and I was like trying to explain it to people, like, guys, you gotta check out this show on Netflix. It's about this high school chemistry teacher that's dying of cancer and making the purest form of meth ever. And people are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, I'm serious. It's amazing. And yeah, it was a good show.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Brandy. We will let this thing export, and we will get you some version of this. And Haley will probably reach out to you with maybe a blog, that she kind of typed up while we were doing this. But we will get something over to you. So thank you for helping out.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi.
Hello. Thoughts?
I thought there was.
I'm sorry. I can't hear
more
you.
than I thought there was going to be.
Yeah. Might be able to kind of like the student confidence one, just not a lot to it, but it's just another one.
Yeah, but I think that having lighthearted ones isn't bad.
Yeah. Can I get you to proof that right quick? While we were kind of wrapping up, I uploaded Rebecca's.
Well, you need an apostrophe in today's.
And teachers. I
Yeah.
close the Zoom call so I don't have to edit all this out later.
Yeah.
And
okay.
then, right.